World War II, a global conflict that shaped the modern world. But what if one of its key players, the United States, never entered the war? What would the world look like today? Before we dive into this fascinating alternate history, make sure to subscribe and give this video a like so you don't miss more videos like this one. Picture this. It's December 7th, 1941, but instead of launching a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, Japan chooses to focus on its conquest of Southeast Asia. The United States remains neutral, caught in a fierce debate at home about whether to intervene in the global conflict. Isolationism, already popular among many Americans, wins. With no direct attack, the U.S. stays on the sidelines, sending supplies to its allies, but never setting boots on foreign soil. Could the Allies survive without U.S. military power? Without the United States joining the fight, the European theater takes a dark turn. By 1942, Nazi Germany is at the peak of its power. With no American forces to aid Britain or bolster Soviet defenses, Hitler turns his full attention eastward. Without American supplies and reinforcements, could the Soviet Union have continued its brutal defense against Nazi forces? While the Red Army was relentless, historians argue that without U.S. Lend-Lease support, the Soviets might have collapsed under the immense pressure. Britain, isolated and battered by the Blitz, would have found itself in an even more dire situation. Without American support, the Battle of the Atlantic may have turned in favor of the Nazis, cutting off Britain's supply lines and leaving them vulnerable to an invasion. Could Churchill rally the British people without hope of American aid? Many historians believe Britain might have been forced into a peace treaty with Nazi Germany, securing Hitler's control over Western Europe. Across the Pacific, Japan would have continued its unchecked domination. With no U.S. forces to contest their expansion, Japan likely would have solidified control over much of Southeast Asia, including the vital resources of the Dutch East Indies. But what about Australia? Without American forces, defending Australia from Japanese invasion would have fallen to British and Commonwealth forces, already stretched thin in Europe. Would the Japanese have eventually launched a full-scale invasion of Australia? It's possible, and the Pacific could have looked very different without the U.S. Navy standing in Japan's way. In this alternate reality, without the U.S. to tip the balance, Hitler's Nazi regime might have solidified its control of Europe, from the Atlantic to the Ural Mountains. The question becomes, what happens next? While internal resistance movements may have fought back, without strong outside help, Nazi Germany could have held on to its empire. Would this have led to a Cold War between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, or even a long-term alliance to carve up the world between them? America's involvement in WW2 didn't just change the war, it reshaped the world. Without the US becoming a global superpower, the creation of organizations like the United Nations and NATO might never have happened. Instead of the US-led rebuilding of Europe through the Marshall Plan, the Soviet Union might have expanded its influence even further, leading to a more divided world. Not between capitalism and communism, but between Nazi fascism and Stalinist socialism.